Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. How are you doing? Howie Marlin here, and I welcomed you to Recovery Matters. This is the first podcast of what I hope will be a long, ongoing dialogue between those of us who are struggling with substances and the folks who are in the front line trying to help. So I encourage you to just play along with me as we get to know each other and maybe be able to review some new innovative things that are coming down the pike and see if we can't make an impact with some folks to address their struggles with addiction. We're going to be covering subjects wide and diverse. We're going to be focusing, of course, on dependence and addiction, whether it be substances like alcohol or drugs or internet, which is a huge growing problem. We'll be covering that, and well, basically, let me start by saying I'm a 63-year-old drummer who grew up in Asbury Park and during the 60s and survived the age of Aquarius of the 70s somehow. I will tell you that I've had one foot in academics and the other foot in I don't know where the hell it was. Certainly in rock and roll, stupidity, and drugs. It seemed I would pursue academics pretty far, do fairly well, and then completely lose it. It took a long time for me to get my head out of whatever it was. And the bottom line is about 30 years ago, when I got married, was the end of the real hanky-panky. And the thing is now, totally sober and really, really looking at helping folks to see if they can live a sane life. Now, I'm a bit of a maverick, and meaning I don't follow the guidelines of any one straight discipline. The truth is, I'm pretty open-minded, and I'm not a AA big book guy, but I do go to AA meetings. Alcohol was never really my thing. I got into a lot of trouble with it, but it wasn't the kind of thing which used to haunt me. And now, here in Massachusetts, with the changing laws of marijuana, my God, the struggles which we're going to be looking at are going to be astronomical. So we'll be looking at what's normal use, what's regular use, what's use that would be deemed okay. And then we'll look at, well, what happens when you get carried away? How does it affect you in the family and the jobs and your money and your security and health and everything? Well, of course, if I have to say all those things, we got to talk. If those are affecting you. Yeah, but people come to me and go, yeah, but Howie, man, I don't have a problem. I mean, I have a pop every now and then. I go to a Pats game, and I'll get a couple of beers, and it's 4 hours later. The last beer I had was an hour or two ago, and didn't have that much to drink anyway. And it doesn't mean I have a problem. Yeah, we'll talk about those things. And with that example, probably no, you don't have a problem. But if it's on your mind, we have to talk. So anyway, my experience as a kid growing up on the Jersey Shore, I grew up right in the back end of Asbury Park. And like I said, the 60s were wild. My orientation was back in the day when I remember people were doing coke, saying coke was not addictive. I mean, really. That's the way it seemed to be, of course. It didn't take too long until we found out the reality of it. But anyway, back then there was a term called Mother's Little Helpers. I'm sure some of you remember that. And so self-medicating wasn't new. It's just that they're the early phase of having the dealers and lab coats. So we're going to be talking about things like that. We're going to be talking about the difference between the cultures and the new generation. Oh my God, I'm going to tell you, parents need so much help nowadays. They got a big uphill struggle. Media, forget it. I mean, if your kids are engaged in, in what they should be, which is all sorts of new media and the videos and the movies. Parents, if you're not listening to the lyrics and you're not going to the movies, you don't know what they're experiencing, and you really need to. So we'll be talking about that as well. Um, my role now as a therapist, I come from working in emergency services for many years with community services here in Martha's Vineyard as an emergency services clinician. Um, 99% of our time was spent in the emergency department, and that's where I got to know people, and they got to know how I behave and how I deal with trauma, stress, psychosis, of course, depression, and the substance-related issues. And aren't they all related, somehow, some way? And family issues. So that experience, along with running a drug education program, a D24 program, drug and alcohol education, I did that for many years, and then running the second offenders aftercare group, a group therapy program for people who forgot about the first offenders program that they took. So anyway, the point being, I've got all that experience with that, and started a private practice a few years ago, seeing just a select few people, um, and it seems to have grown on its own. Um, you know, being the kind of guy that doesn't think in a box, sometimes I may stretch things, but the reality is I'm looking out for the client. I am absolutely client-centric, which, when it comes to institutions, can be a bit of a pain, putting the needs of my client first. However, we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about how that impacts on a clinician's life, on your relationships with other people in your industry, whether you work with them directly or related. And we'll cover those things as well. I am based here on Martha's Vineyard, a little island off of Cape Cod, off of New England. Um, you know, Small, remote, isolated communities are all over the country. A lot are separated by rivers or hills or mountain ranges or deserts or what have you, but we have a moat. We have a moat. In order to get here, you either fly or you're going to take a boat. 45-minute ferry ride, and it's really interesting how isolated communities are subject to pretty interesting dynamics. Um, there was a movie done about I think heroin's killing my town, about Cape Cod, Massachusetts. I probably got the name wrong, but folks, straighten me out. I'll send you to my web site at the end of the podcast, and please do make corrections and suggestions, and tell me what you think about things. But my point being, there was a movie about heroin use on Cape Cod, and they were talking about the isolation of the region and the fact that although Cape Cod is part of the mainland, well, yeah, it is, except you got to go over a bridge, and there is a canal that separates it, a body of water, and the bridge is not that big a deal. But the point being, it is isolated. And yes, these communities on Cape Cod, Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, and Springfield, Mass. That's the same thing. A much larger community, I grant you that, and they're very different dynamics, with the exception of the fact that being out in the middle of nowhere, having few resources, complicate things. So we'll talk about the environment. We'll talk about the community. We'll talk about the social structure. We'll talk about the culture that the kids are looking through now. The almost, oh my God, it's so painful to realize that subcultures have such a dynamic impact on people. When you grow up and you're in the grade school, you can have a good grade where kids are communicative and fun and funny, or you can have a bad grade where there's a group of people who are angry and always hostile and acting out. So yeah, there's a lot of things to take into consideration. So we'll talk about nature versus nurture. We'll talk about community. We'll talk about parenting and why it's so difficult now. It's never been easy, and each generation faces its challenges. But holy mother of God, the technology is forcing people to address things which are really unique. So we'll be talking about that. I hope to have these on Wednesday nights. Who knows? Maybe with a regular night, we'll have some live callers, and that would be a lot of fun. So we'll see if we can do that. I do want to invite people to get on the show as guest hosts, and getting the dialogue going is the main purpose of this podcast, is to inspire people to talk to each other, to inspire family members to talk to one another, and inspire the community members to get together and talk about their challenges. I'm praying that we can minimize the stigma, that we can normalize the blunt reality of how difficult this is, so that you're not intimidated to reach out to each other. You're not afraid to speak to each other, and gather resources and use those resources. I mean, folks, one of the biggest challenges that I find here is running into families who are afraid to talk to other families, that their children are struggling with the same things. And by the way, we will talk about, as I alluded to before, the changing laws with marijuana. And like I said, I'm an old hippie, so yeah, I get it. I get it. But the developing mind, don't touch it. The only real sin of my development was the fact that I was exposed to all these substances at such a young age. And, I would not have had that happen to me if I had any choice. And when it came to my children, I guided them past that. I was, incredibly lucky. My children have had their fair share of challenges. But the reality is, these are very different times. And when it comes to marijuana, we'll be having a long, long discussion. So we'll be talking about that. And before we go too much further, I will be focusing on interventions. As we talk about substances and struggling in addiction, I'll be talking about ways to address it, how a family member, can crack the egg to getting people to begin to think in stages of change, to taking action, and helping them see the reality of the difficulties they're facing. The bottom line to all of this is that we have the ability to affect change. And we have to step out of our comfort zone. We have to get motivated. And how that happens is a huge mystery. We're all different. So for some people, a blunt, in-your-face approach works. And then for others, you have to be really subtle and really gentle and repeat it over and over. Let's not forget, folks, so the road to sobriety is not a superhighway. It's a damn lightning bolt. It zigs and it zags and it disappears and then it reappears. I know it's not a good analogy, but the multi-angled and dead-ended bolt coming down to the ground is not a bad visualization, because those of us who were over our heads with substances really, how do you find your way? There is no quote unquote way. There's just opportunities to explore what works for you. And things change over time. So what may work this spring isn't going to work next fall. You may have a different job. You may have a different, relationship. Things may change. And change, change is tough. But the focus will be on helping people affect change. The biggest trick is opening your heart. And if you open your heart to hear the message that the person is saying, to feel the pain of what they're expressing, if you can open your heart, if you can feel the type of pain they're working with, then you can better help them open new doors, widen the blinders, rise up and get that 10,000-foot view. I use that phrase a lot. You know the term, you can't tell the forest for the trees, right? So when you're in the midst of your shit, how are you going to tell how large the problem is? How where does it impact on who and why? How are you going to tell? You have to rise above it, and it's rising above it spiritually. But using this metaphor with altitude, when you rise up, it's just like being in an airplane at 30,000 feet. If you're looking down, you can see the mountains far in the distance over to the west. And you can see the plains, and you can see the rivers. And you can see where you're going. You can see where you've been. And I like that analogy. Because if you're able to rise yourself up spiritually and see where your path is going, you may not like where that's going to end up. You don't want to be there in the middle of the tar pit areas. Like that, if we keep going in this direction, no bueno. So if you can, in this visualization, find a place, metaphorically, where you want to be, well, what's wrong with working towards getting there? After all, if you don't know where there is, how are you going to get there? If you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there, right? So we find a place, a goal, a place to go. That goal, that vision. And we work on that. And that will really be the energy that I put out when we talk about addressing issues. Because I want people to open their hearts. I want people to open their blinders. I want people to get a greater view of their world. And once you have that, then you can start to make decisions about how you want to do things that will impact the result. You know, I call my company Decisions Counseling because life is nothing but decisions, good ones and bad ones. You know what wisdom is. One of the definitions of wisdom is having made a ton of mistakes. And we need to make mistakes. As human beings, we need to experience them. Once experienced, they go into the wisdom department of our brain, and we know better than to pick up that snake or, to juggle knives or, things like that. Don't pick up that frying pan, right? So these are the things that don't pick up the frying pan without a mitt. You know what I'm talking about. You earn your respect by experience. You earn your self-respect by proving the qualities of what makes you who you are. And we have to let our children do that. We have to let our children fall down. If they don't fall down, they don't know what it feels like to fall down, and they don't know what it feels like to pull themselves back up. And once they've pulled themselves back up, when they're at another risky situation and they're at risk of falling down, they don't fear because they know they've got the strength to pull themselves back up. And that boldness allows them to experience life. They're not afraid to get out of it. Now, I'm sure some of you going, now, wait a minute, some people are just too bold. You go, yeah. Everything I say you can take to the extreme, and I'm sure you'll be able to argue every single point if you take it all the way to the extreme. But let's not, forget the fact that I'm talking to you from the United States of America in 2018 in New England. So my perspective is of that. If you hear something which bothers you, if you disagree with, go to my website, howiemarlin.com. And in the bottom, tell me what you think. Add to the communication. I'll be starting a blog, and if you guys want to, chime in there, that's great. And if you've got an exciting angle on something, I would love to have you on the show. So, hey, share your ideas. And I particularly want you to share your ideas with other family members. Now, if you are of, parenting age, and that goes from 16 up to 1 million, and you've got children, and children are being faced with these confrontations, we please listen in. Particularly those of you who are seeing your children getting far too carried away with video games and internet access. And I'm going to tell you right now, we will be talking a lot about internet addictions. I'll tell you, when I saw there's this one particular game, which Candy Crush, which is insanely cool, and the entertainment value, there's no two ways about it, but they really have touched on, and I'm sure I'm going to hear from Candy Crush now, the psychometrics of what stimulates the brain to produce the chemicals, which are the very things we try to get externally when we, do pills, drugs, and whatever, alcohol. You know, the endorphins that it kicks in and all the other chemicals that these reward centers in our brain supply us with. You know, perfect example. And um, just about all the major apps have done research and have tailored themselves to wanting to, to dance with you, to get you engaged in the dance, to get you uh, motivated and enthusiastic about participating and, wanting your eyeballs. And then, of course, placing either ads or charging you for thrills, extra little ski balls or extra little things like what was the name of the game I just talked about, Candy Crush. Um, so anyway, that's one example. And there are kids now. There are these multiplayer, massive multiplayer, MMPI something. I forget the acronym. These games where people get immersed, totally immersed. So much so that they do not want to let go of it, and they do not want to pause the game. They will wear diapers or keep bottles to urinate in, and they will drink Red Bull, crazy Red Bull, Adderall. I mean, they'll just stay up for days. And I'm sure everybody who's listening to this is nodding like a little bobblehead doll, going, "Yeah, I know somebody who's just really over the top with this." And like, yeah, we'll probably spend many episodes talking about this because the style. I mean, just from Facebook, people who have to, tweet every day and are compelled to do it and you know and create their own verbiage and create their own logic and no, where am I going? Never mind. Uh, yeah, but the point is, people are getting very dependent on these technologies. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but how many of us come down for coffee and do not have their phone in their hand? I mean, I pray there's a lot of us who don't, but I'm sure there's a lot of us who do. And there's people I see who, I greet them in the morning. They've got their iPad and their phone. And don't you take that iPad and phone away from them. You want to start World War III? Yeah, I know. I know. I worked with a family whose daughter was just not going to let go of that phone. And as an example, as I was talking to the mother, I took my cell phone out of my pocket and I said, "This belongs the phone that your daughter uses. Who owns it?" She goes, "I do." "This belongs to you, right?" "Yeah." I said, "Well, does your daughter does she need to have it in her hands every day?" She goes, "No, but she won't let go of it." And I said, "Well, there's one thing you can do." And I took my phone and I just dropped it into the trash. Oh my God. That didn't go over well. Even the mere thought of eliminating that access was enough to set things into a tizzy. So yeah, I mean that's just a mild example, not so mild in reality, but that's just an example of how, difficult technology dependence is. So I know I went a little far afield on that because it's something that's on the top of my mind. So yeah, we will certainly be talking um, much more about that. So, there's a few shout outs here. I want to thank some folks. First and foremost, Woody Giesman from Right Turn. Woody Giesman is a drummer extraordinaire from the Del Fuegos, who is the director or grand poobah of Right Turn. They call it substance abuse treatment with a touch of cool, and it certainly is. And So I don't work for him or with them, but Woody, we're like twin brothers from different mothers, and his motivation and support I couldn't do without. Phil Valentine from CCAR, recovery coaching program there in Connecticut. Phil, you are a god, and I enjoy every time I'm in one of your programs. Or I just got certified for a recovery coach for the emergency department, which was really fascinating, and it proved that I'm certainly on the right road there. So thank you, Phil. Tom Bennett from Martha's Vineyard Community Services, an idol of mine. The man's been doing it for 50 years, folks. 50 years, I think, somewhere about there. And he has touched more lives than you can imagine. And so, I want to thank him very much for his guidance and support throughout the years, and the impact he's had on this tiny community here in Martha's Vineyard. Dr. Karen Casper, over at the Martha's Vineyard Hospital in the Emergency Department. Oh, Dr. Zach, Dr. Verk, Dr. Tome, Dr. Vieira. I can go on and on. I mean, I love you guys to death. And Mike Hargan and Joe Harper and oh, gee, my Lord. I mean, I will go down the laundry list of all the staff, the Pre and Rich and all the folks who, I mean, my God, I know. Carol, please. Lizzie, Sarah, yeah, I know I'm probably overdoing it. I am leaving so many out, and I'm so sorry, but I will talk about you guys in detail later. My experience in the ED, just phenomenal, and I appreciate all of your guidance and support. And then my sister-in-law, Hanako, my brother's wife, just so encouraging for me to do these podcasts. And so Rick, give Hanako a big hug. And Hanako, thank you so much for your support, and really appreciate that you saw that this was the right thing to do, and it certainly is. Stacy Wise, Smart Recovery. Stacy, please. My Lord, we'll go down the laundry list of the recovery coaches, and I'll tell you that it's just amazing when I think of Tom and Eric and Angela and all the recovery coaches. Please. So thank you all very much. They're my shout outs. I know I bored everybody else to death, but I think that's a good way to end here. And I'll say, you can drop me a line at howiemarlin.com. That's the website that takes you to Recovery Matters podcast, and actually it's the decisions making website. And please drop me a line. Let me know what you think about how things are going, and we'll take it from there. Well, on behalf of everybody that I've mentioned, and all the good wishes and well wishes of everybody who is involved in the program, here from Recovery Matters, I'm Howie Marlin, and you can reach me at howiemarlin.com. So I wish you all well. Happiness, may the sunshine be in your face and the wind on your backside. See you next time.